Have you ever felt stuck in your growth journey, wondering how to build resilience in the face of challenges?
Or maybe you're looking to shift your mindset and unlock your full potential.
Well, if you said yes, then you are in the right place.
Welcome to the Stretch Zone. I'm Hannah.
And I am Feds.
And here we explore self-development, nurture resilience, and embrace the mindset shifts that help you grow beyond your limits. Hello and welcome back. We're on to episode 5 of our second season. Hi Feds, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, thank you.
Good.
When I read the title of what we've come up for today, I went, oh yeah, this is going to be a good one. So we're talking about how to handle constructive criticism without taking it personally. Have you ever taken constructive criticism without taking it personally, Feds?
No, never. Never. I don't think I'm the only one, to be honest.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is going to be super interesting. I'm interested to hear the psychology behind this knee-jerk feeling of, when your boss tells you, hey, just want to have a chat about this, whatever you've done, let's discuss it. And that feeling of absolute dread, where does that come from? I'm really interested to talk about that. So we're really diving into this topic, which is like the ultimate moment for personal growth. Let's face it. It's like personal growth superpower if we can overcome this feeling of not being deflated or dejected or just in your own self-pity or turmoil when someone criticizes us. And we're going to talk about sort of positive criticism, negative criticism, and how we can learn not to crawl immediately under the blanket when someone gives us feedback. And a spoiler alert, it's not about just growing thicker skin, apparently. It is, of course, about growing a thicker mindset. So I think all of us know and can think immediately to that feeling of hiding, that idea of getting into a small space, getting under the blanket kind of feeling. And funnily enough, when I was thinking about this, I have to say that for me, and we'll talk a bit more about this, it's always work related. So in life, there are moments where I can handle criticism much, much better, but I know I'm hyper alert when it comes to a work environment. Don't know where that's from, but I just know that I can get a text from my boss this is when I was a yoga teacher, so people are like laughing at me thinking, you had a boss as a yoga teacher? The studio owner, maybe?
Yeah.
And I'd see the name flash up on the screen and instantly I would worry. Even though I know that I haven't really done anything wrong, probably hadn't done anything wrong, and 99.9% of the time I hadn't ever done anything wrong, I will instantly think, oh, what have I done?
I think a lot of people are in that situation.
Do you relate to that? Did that ever happen to you?
When I was younger, I think this is something that I've learned to overcome. So when I was younger, I used to be much more worried about work feedback. I think I've been lucky. I mean, in the past 5 years of my life, I've been working by myself for myself. So I don't really have a manager who gives me negative feedback. Having said that, I have to say sometimes I miss feedback because it's really what makes you grow.
Absolutely.
And so I also feel like in the last job I had as an employee, I had amazing managers and I never really had issues with negative feedback. It was always very well constructed. So I think I've been very lucky. When I was younger, I had some situations unfortunately, but I think it happens to everyone, I had negative experiences with some managers. And so they made me feel guilty of making mistakes. If I look back to that right now, I'm just thinking, well, I was young and dumb and I learned how to be better. But I think it's something that can be trained. We can learn how to become
I agree.
better.
I agree because, I was a yoga teacher full time for 12 years. That's all I was doing was just teaching yoga and basically my own boss because I contracted out to
Yeah.
studios and then I created my own workshops and things. But um, in that time, even though 99.9% of the time when my boss would or someone that I was working with sent me a message, my instant reaction was, what do I need to do? Or there's a panic. I was able to train myself to very quickly talk myself down.
Hmm.
So we'll talk about that a little bit, I think, now
Yeah.
as well. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
more about why it hurts so much or we get that knee jerk reaction.
Well, we talked a little bit about the amygdala before, and we know that basically the amygdala is like an overprotective friend who
Yeah.
panics whenever you are 5 minutes late, answering a text. So the main job of the amygdala is to protect you, to keep you safe, and to make sure that you survive. And so every single time someone criticizes you, even kindly, your amygdala kicks in. And so it's a teeny tiny part of our brain, but it really lights up like a Christmas tree, and it's impossible to ignore it. It is something that we can train 100%, but it's something that we need to do consciously. So every time we get feedback, our brain interprets it as a threat. And so here there needs to be a little bit of a clarification. So when we talk about threat, it could also be a physical threat, an emotional threat, and there has been some research done on what part of the brain lights up. So through some MRI scan, um, scientists found out that when we feel hurt, both emotionally as well as physically, pretty much the same part of the brain lights up. So we know that for us, getting a negative feedback is pretty much the same thing as getting a slap in the face,
Mm.
literally. And so you would feel like your heart rate might jump, you might get defensive, you're going to start shutting down. Something very peculiar about the amygdala is that it avoids critical thinking in general. So, or your prefrontal cortex shuts down completely. So you can't think straight, you can't think clearly. So, in a situation like receiving feedback, the first thing that we're going to do is to go in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And so your emotional response needs to be trained. This is something that I struggled with when I was younger. You are young, you are inexperienced, you've never received feedback before. And so your brain doesn't really perceive the difference. Like to me, it would have been exactly the same thing if my boss slapped me in the face.
It's so
Now,
interesting when you actually say the slap in the face,
mhm,
such a brilliant description of that knee jerk
yeah,
criticism feeling and that negative criticism feeling. I
yeah,
think that's such a literal sensation that comes through my whole
yeah.
body, and visualization is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there is also a great connection between what we do and who we are.
Mm.
It's no surprise that whenever we talk about our job, we normally say, I am a doctor, I am a lawyer. We
Yeah.
don't say what we do, we say who we are. And
Yeah.
so the exact moment someone criticizes whatever you do, you feel like I messed up. I must be a failure. We make this instant connection between what we feel and who we are. And so this is something that could be a trick when it comes to your mind. You have to develop a very strong awareness that what you do as a job is not who you are in life. They are two different things. You need to separate action from identity.
Mm.
And this takes practice as well. So one great thing that we're going to talk about a little bit is neuroplasticity. So we know that the brain can change, it can grow. It is plastic in the sense that it changes depending on what we are exposed to. And so, as a result, we know that if you start practicing some little tips and tricks throughout your day or every time you get feedback, it is definitely going to help you. You are going to feel a lot better, and little by little, you are going to take this feedback a bit more positively. So, one, for example, a couple of practical science backed moves that we can suggest is as soon as you get feedback, don't react straight away.
Mm.
We know that most likely your brain is going to go in fight or flight mode. So the last thing you want to do is to take action straight away because probably you're going to tell your boss to, you know, you're not going to say something nice.
Yeah.
So take a pause. Just pause for at least 6 seconds. Give your brain, give your emotional brain the time to cool down a little bit and see things from a different perspective. And another thing that we were actually talking about earlier, try to label your feelings, try to understand exactly how you feel. And not just by saying, I'm angry, I'm sad, we can really go deep into the feeling. And this is something that not many people do. I don't think many people appreciate the importance of labeling how we feel exactly. There is a very good tool, and you can find it online anywhere, which is called Emotional Granularity Wheel. And it's basically a wheel that breaks down the main feelings and also the subgroups related to that feeling. And I think it's a very important tool because oftentimes we don't even know how to call our feelings. So you can start from there. You can go online, you can download it, pretty easy to find. So, in short, criticism hurts, feedback can hurt because your brain simply thinks that it's a survival threat. And so we have to really come to peace with this idea that we are not what we do. We are not our job. We are two different things, and we need to train ourselves to think like that. We can learn how to handle criticism. Um, have you noticed any differences, when you were younger to a later stage in life? How has your
Yeah.
reaction changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've made so many awesome points just there, Feds. Yes. So when I was younger, I would say I still really struggle with criticism, constructive if it's a place for me to grow from, or a
Hmm.
negative, just flat out negative criticism. Absolutely. However, I definitely know that I react better now as an adult. Absolutely, 100%. And I was thinking about um, how some people react. I sort of feel like there's sort of two camps. This is the two camps that I've seen, and I know definitely which one I sit in.
Hmm.
When we get feedback, some people use that as the fear of feedback. They use that as their fuel to improve themselves, to
Hmm.
be a perfectionist, to never have anyone tell them that they've done something wrong, drives them to be amazing at what they do. So they become a master at their whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm going to use the word perfectionist probably as well. And then there's the others that go the opposite direction. They'll just avoid putting themselves in a situation that feels like you could get feedback, that could be negative, that could feel disheartening, or
Hmm.
however we're talking about it today. I definitely sit in the I'll avoid a situation if I can. If I think I'm
Yeah.
going to fail at it and someone's going to notice and tell me that, then
Hmm.
I'll move away and just be like, oh, I won't do that then.
Yeah.
Um, and I was thinking really strongly about this because I'm thinking about the difference between my husband and I. My husband's the perfectionist. He uses it as fuel to be absolutely amazing at what he does. And I have definitely for years and years kind of avoided pushing myself into those kind of extreme situations. However, I am now 41 years old, And I do believe that I've found a much sort of better place. And I think it's my age, I think it's experience of life, and I'm going to put it down to also all the fact that I'm constantly putting myself into new situations, living all over the world and having to start again. That's kind of helped. And my mindfulness practice. So you were talking about labeling things, and you're absolutely right. I don't think people do that on the whole. And I remember the first time I practiced mindfulness in that way, where you're just gently inquiring, because that's what mindfulness is. It's observation of where you are in the moment. And it's often the best way to practice it is by labeling what's happening in that moment. And it could be sounds, it could be sensations, it could be emotions. So once I started to tap into that through my yoga practice, I know that I have started to bring that into life. So I'm someone who I think is very lucky. My husband does think I'm a weirdo, but he's kind of actually thinks I'm pretty mental. It's taken him nearly 15 years that we've been together, 14 years. I can't remember how many years we've been together. It's nearly taken all that time for him to be like, oh, this is who she is. I can be someone that can be really fiery very quickly, but I can diffuse just as quickly as well. So it takes me a while to get fiery. You know, you have to push me, but when I do, I'll go, and then I can diffuse very quickly on the whole. I've always been able to do that, and I do think something in there, I like to take a step back and observe what's happening. I'm able to do that quite quickly, and I've used that as definitely is one of my positives in life. And once I then figured out mindfulness, that was then like amazing for me. Sit back, observe, and start labeling what's going on here. That's what I do. So I think I did it before I knew and practiced mindfulness. And I mastered it once I actually started to learn more about mindfulness techniques.
I mean, there are people who are naturally very good at managing feedback and reacting to feedback. The problem is that in general, I think the system doesn't really help us learn how to react to feedback.
Of course.
Starting from, you know, going to school and primary school, secondary school, university, we are constantly pushed more and more into excellence, which is not a bad thing itself. The problem is that how the feedback is delivered.
Yes.
And also the fact that we get judged based on how good we do something. And if we are not good enough, then most people simply believe that they are not talented enough, right? So, you know, we talked a little bit about growth mindset and fixed mindset, which is basically the core essence of most everything I do, pretty much, with languages and my coaching. But it's very hard for people to understand the difference between these two things. So what you were mentioning, where you were talking about the difference between you and your husband. So your husband has most likely developed a very strong growth mindset. So every time he receives feedback, he thinks immediately, what can I learn from this? How can I apply this feedback
I'm
in
going
a
to just make sure
way?
that I say this. This is in work world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not every aspect.
No, will work. Okay, let me work.
And I'm not in work world, so no,
Yeah. So
life.
he's probably used to receive tons of feedback at work.
Yes, all the time.
And so, of course, the only way to survive in an environment like that is to think, right, what can I do with this piece of information? And how can I turn this piece of information into something that is useful for me in my career so that I can become a better professional, right?
Yeah.
This is how, but it's something that we need to do intentionally. People are surprised when you're like, oh, but I don't understand how people can do that, because they choose to do it.
Yeah.
We have the choice, right?
Absolutely.
So every single time that we talk about anything on this podcast, there needs to be you guys need to know you have the choice. You can
Yeah.
choose to react differently to feedback. We talked about labeling feelings, we talked about pausing, we can talk about as well mantras that you can tell yourself. You know, every single time someone comes to you and give you a negative feedback just for the sake of it, not because they were asked, it probably shows more about the other person than you, realistically. So there are many different things that we can do to try and learn how to take all this feedback more positively, but it needs to be done intentionally. It doesn't just happen magically because we wake up one day and we say, right, I want to become better at reacting to feedback. Okay, pick one, stick to it, and do it every single time someone triggers you.
It's really interesting. I'm listening to you speak and listening to how where our conversation's going, and I think, and you were talking about how we're not set up for this, like in schooling years or whatever. And I think what a lot of us fear is failure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We, if we haven't practiced that skill at a young age,
Mm-hmm.
then it's so much harder to break through that as an adult if
Mm-hmm.
possible. And I feel like I'm doing it more now than I ever have. So
Mm-hmm.
things for me that have been really challenging may not be challenging for you, although you and I are quite similar. So for example, someone might have a fear of moving overseas, so they'll never do it. That wasn't my challenge of
Mm-hmm.
failure. That wasn't a failure for me, even if it did fail, for example.
Yeah.
My fear of failures are usually around work stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's like my big nemesis, that I need to sit on the couch about and go deeper as to what that's about. But so right now, I've been learning loads of stuff through a marketing course, and they are constantly telling us about really pushing ourselves to basically get knocked back. And I know we said it's not about thick skin, and it isn't about thick skin, but it's about actually realizing that you can survive
Yeah.
that failure of someone not reaching out to you or saying no,
Yeah.
they don't want to work with you, or no one responding. That feels like a failure, right? Or actually
Yeah.
ever kind of pushing ourselves to take our business off the ground. And that all feels so intense, but they are constantly encouraging us to actually just pick yourself up and now fail 10 times. So that's kind
Yeah.
of part of the system that I'm working with at the moment is, okay, come back and speak to us once you've actually been knocked back 10 times, and then we'll
Yeah.
discuss why you're being knocked back and figure out how you can not be knocked back. But you need to
Yeah.
experience it
Yeah.
to know that you can survive it.
Yeah. I think that there are some jobs, because of course we can talk about feedback in life and feedback at work. There are some jobs that
Give us
are,
back, right?
yeah, yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
All
I
the
wouldn't.
time.
When I think about private life, I wouldn't even call it feedback. I would call it judgment. But that's a whole different episode. But there are some jobs that are naturally more exposed
Yes.
to constructive criticism.
Yes.
Like, I follow a couple of neuroscientists
Yeah.
on Instagram, and there is one specifically that I find incredibly interesting. And every single time someone questions what she says, she always gets back in the same way. She's like, "Well, I'm a scientist. I'm supposed to question everything I do. I am
Mhm.
supposed to not be content with what I do because my job." Is to ask myself questions. So if
Yes.
you come to me and you criticize what I do constructively and I can learn from it, then it means that there is something I can do better. And that's exactly part of my job. So going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, this idea of perfection is relative in this situation because a researcher, a scientist, knows that true perfection doesn't really exist and it shouldn't exist because the
Yeah.
moment when you find perfection, what you believe is perfection, that's the moment you stop questioning and that's the moment when you stop giving and receiving feedback.
That
If
is so powerful.
if we did that, we would still be living in teepees, probably, in caves. So there are some jobs, of course, like researchers that need by trade, they learn how to deal with criticism differently or feedback in general. And I think it would be so interesting if the same techniques were taught to school students in general. How to question things, how to go beyond the grade that you get at school.
Yeah.
I've been looking into Montessori method,
Yep.
and it's basically based on it's not based on grades. You don't get any grades. And some parents are like, oh, how do you understand if a kid is good at doing something if they don't get any grade? And I'm like, well, I know a lot of people with good grades and they're still idiots. How do you explain that?
It's a type of intelligence, let's face it. It's one type.
Yeah. So, there are ways in which we can train ourselves and, of course, our kids, if we have kids, to deal with feedback differently. We need to learn how to give feedback differently so that we can also learn how to receive
Mm-hmm.
feedback differently. But the most important thing is that we always have to remember that it is not a physical threat. No one is going to hurt us physically. And again, we have to consciously remind ourselves. We have to intentionally think, it's okay. No one is going to slap me in the face physically. I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Unless you are a surgeon, or unless you are a pilot, you're not saving lives. I used to have these terrible reactions. And I used to work in a travel agency. And then at some point, I was like thinking to myself, listen, I'm not saving any lives today. The sun will shine tomorrow. I made a mistake the next time, I'm not going to do it. And, I learned from that yes, you have to do your job well, but there are so many better ways to take feedback.
So much food for thought. Love it. Really, really interesting topic. We can
Um,
definitely still um,
yeah.
learn from this for sure.
No, absolutely, 100%. I'm curious to know if, well, now you're working for yourself as a coach. So how do you deal with these not having feedback?
Yeah, so I am getting more feedback now than I ever have because
Good.
I integrate it into my coaching. So I always ask for feedback at the end of our time together. And then, actually, even currently, still halfway through my sessions with my clients, I will have a longer review. And part of that review is actually offering me feedback on what's working, what isn't working, and making sure that we're on the right path for them and having a really open and clear, honest conversation. And the more I've done that, the easier it is.
Yeah,
It's as simple as that. And I actually
yeah.
forward to those days because now I've got a bit of a system in place. I've got
Hmm.
good questions that sort of help me ask those awkward questions. I offer it in a way that they don't even have to tell me immediately. They can go away and think. And people have been really, really good at offering open and honest feedback. Sure, I'm sure sometimes a person might feel a little on the spot, but most of the time people have been really gracious, and I occasionally might feel a little, oh, really? I didn't know that was what I was doing.
Hmm.
But I can really see the positives in it. So
Hmm.
actually, yes, since I've become a coach, I would say I've been getting more feedback than ever. Yeah.
Nice. So this is probably the foundation to all the things we said in this episode, like try and get feedback regularly so you get
Yeah.
used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Put
Yeah. What about
yourself in
you?
in a situation. I'm
You also work for yourself.
uh, well, I do get some feedback from my students. It's a bit tricky. I think it's a cultural thing. I work with a lot of Asian students, and they tend to be
Yep.
extremely polite
Yep.
to the point of not telling me if there are any problems whatsoever. So I guess I've been receiving feedback in the last 5 years, working online, work by myself, or maybe I just I'm just so used to it, to getting feedback, that to me it's not even a threat anymore, and
Mm,
I don't experience it as negatively as I used to. Um, but I guess when my business will grow, because I would like it to grow and I would like to expand it. I would like to do different things. The feedback is going to change as well. So it's something that is constantly changing. It's something that I constantly need to upgrade in that sense.
yeah.
So
That's a good way of putting it, because
yeah,
it will ever evolve. If we truly want to grow as people, it will constantly evolve. If we've plateaued with feedback, then we've probably plateaued a bit in whatever we're doing because we're never ever perfect, as you
yeah,
just rightly said. I really, that was really profound, talking about the scientists today and saying that actually, if we can never reach perfectionism, because we should always be open to learning.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, feedback is not really a personal attack, and I mean, it's we shouldn't take it as a personal attack. And I think that when it comes to constructive criticism and it's delivered politely, respectfully, with evidence, then it's a moment for growth. When it's negative and there is no evidence whatsoever, then it tells you more about the other person than of your performance. So, um, but yeah, I'm curious for all the people who are listening. Tell us, how is your experience with feedback? How do you normally react? What do you normally do? Are you good at receiving feedback? Are you good at giving feedback? Some people are really good at that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and just remember, maybe this week, the next time you get that "bleh" feeling when someone's telling you some feedback or offering some feedback, instead of shutting down or fighting back, take that 6-minute pause, label what's happening for you in the moment,
yeah,
and then see if you can react. That's a good
there,
one. I'm going
yeah.
to put that in this week.
hmm there is
And,
this quote that we have here. Sorry, that it just makes me laugh because it says, "Feedback is like broccoli. Nobody craves it at first, but it's weirdly good for you." So keep that in mind this week.
I do eat a lot of broccoli, so
There we go. Yeah. So yeah.
maybe that's why I'm getting better at feedback.
hmm
And
Um,
next time we meet is going to be about back towards more about expat kind of life, and we're talking about the guilt that comes with living away from home, and how you can try to enjoy your new life without feeling like a bad daughter or a bad sister or a bad friend.
yes, I think we've been there. One way or another, living in one place or living in another. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for today. It was great. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
this conversation.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
was a good one. Take care.
Yes.
Bye bye.
Bye. Wrapping up today's episode, remember, you don't have to face change alone.
If you'd like to connect or learn more about working with us individually, reach out to us through our Instagram account at @thestretchzone_podcast, or find our emails in the footnotes to this episode. We're here to support you on your journey, each in your own way.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Stretch Zone. If today's discussion resonated with you, remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with anyone who might benefit. Until next time, keep stretching beyond your comfort zone.